Good evening all and welcome to December, the last month of 2020. Tonight, we are going to be delving into the world of creepy people that we'd rather not meet. So sit back, relax, get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. In high school, one of my best friends was a girl called Susan. She lived with her mum and stepdad out in the middle of nowhere. Even though we were the same age, her parents treated her a lot differently than my parents treated me. For one thing, I was expected to go to driver's training and get a license and a job. I saved enough money working at a fast food job that my parents let me buy a used car. Nothing fancy. I was expected to pay all expenses for it. Susan's parents felt I was a bad influence on her because of my job and my car. Susan wasn't allowed to take driver's training or get a job. After we graduated high school, I joined the military and lost touch with Susan. In the early 90s, living on my own, my parents called me one day at work and passed along a message that Susan had called and wanted to see me. I was really excited to see her. I loved her like a sister. She said she was staying with her mum and stepdad and asked if I remembered where they lived. Of course, I told her. We made arrangements for me to pick her up one night, as she still didn't have a driver's license, and we'd go to dinner and catch up. The night of our get-together, I drove to her childhood home. I went to the back door of a screened-in porch, and I couldn't help but be a little disturbed and puzzled at what I saw. Stuck to the ceiling were the covers of dozens of paperback books. The books hung down from their covers on the ceiling all over the room. On one wall facing the door of the porch was a large picture of a half-man, half-goat. It held something in its hand. I don't remember what. There were about 10 bowls with candles in them on the floor and on the tables. I was taking in all of this when I heard Susan say, "Jane, come round here. We don't use that room anymore except for special purposes." I went around to the front door and she let me in. There were 3 chairs set up facing the door and 3 people were sitting in the chairs. I recognized her mother as one of the people. Her stepfather, wearing nothing but an open bathrobe, was leaning to one side and drooling. There was another woman seated that I didn't recognize. No one introduced me to her. I smiled and simply said hi to them all. Susan stood off to the side of the half circle of seated people. None of the people responded to my greeting. They all just stared, unsmiling. No one said anything. They seemed to be evaluating me. That's when I got frightened. I thought to myself, are these people going to try and end me? And out here, no one would hear me make a sound. I turned to Susan and say, you ready to go?" She was ready, and we left without incident. We had a nice dinner and a nice visit. I asked her about the room and what it all meant, but she said she didn't want to talk about that. After dinner, I drove her home and didn't get out the car. I couldn't get away fast enough. At work the next day, I was told I had a call from Susan, but it was her mother looking for her. I told her I didn't know where she was, and soon after, and unrelated to this, I moved into a different apartment in a nearby town and got a different job. I never saw Susan again. She reached out to me again on some reunion website, but I never responded. I don't know if they were into devil worshipping or something else, but it really frightened me. For a few weeks after that, strange things happened. I would get phone calls where no one would say anything. I was driving along one day and a tire flew off a car in the oncoming lane and crashed into the windshield of the car behind me. They weren't injured, but I wonder if it was all connected to the strange happenings of that house. This happened to me when I was 11 and staying at my friend Kit's house. Kit was one of those cool kids in school who was always up to trouble. Looking back, I don't understand how I managed to remain friends with him for so long, as I was anything but cool and never did anything he did. One night, I was staying over at his place one Friday after school, and we started playing touch football in the backyard one-on-one. After playing for about 20 minutes, he asked if I heard of a game called Mop, which I didn't. He explained to me the way the game works is you hide by the road, and when someone walks or drives past, you shout the word Mop, hoping to get some kind of reaction. I suppose the game can be known by other names, but he called it Mop. I agreed, so we went down to his front yard and looked up and down the road to see if anyone was heading our way. I should note that Kit's house isn't actually on a main road, so the only reason you would drive down past on the left is if you had a house further down or had to turn down an intersection street for more houses. And about 20 houses past Kit's is a bush, so I wasn't expecting many people to pass by. I hid behind the garbage bins, which stand by the driveway fence, and Kit was hiding on the opposite side in the garden. At this point it was 4 p.m, so it was still light out, which to me made the game sound less fun. About 2 minutes in, a car drives by and Kit shouts Mop. Nothing happened, which was to no one's surprise. I knew someone driving by wouldn't even be able to hear us. Not long after, a man and woman were walking their dog, and as they were about to walk out of sight of Kit's house, he shouts Mop. The man and the woman stopped and looked around confused for 5 seconds and then began walking again. That was the exact reaction I was expecting. After about 10 more disappointing reactions, I was starting to get bored, but Kit was just having too much fun. Eventually I noticed a homeless man looking to make his way over. Kit hadn't seen him yet, so I gave him the signal that someone was near and he waited. As the man was getting closer, I could see that he was talking to himself like he was arguing with someone. As he got closer, I saw the man was at least in his 40s. I could see how dirty he looked, with long, greasy black hair, his face covered in dirt, and I was getting nervous. When the man was going past my sight, I heard Kit shout something I was not expecting. He shouts, "Dickhead." The man looks right towards the house in an instant, looking absolutely furious. I was freaking out as the man could have easily spotted me hiding behind the bins. The man started passing back and forth with his eyes fixed on the house, muttering to himself. Eventually he started walking back the way he was heading, and once he was out of view, I got out from behind the bins and made my way over to Kit. I was about to open my mouth to tell him how stupid that was when he said, "Let's follow him." I told him it was a terrible idea, but as a stupid 11-year-old kid, I agreed. We kept following at a distance, and followed him off the road at the entrance of the bush. We hid behind a car and watched the man as he went in. I want to say that we left at that point, but Kit wanted to see where he was going, so we followed. Kit went in first and I followed close behind. I was walking as quietly as possible, but the leaves were also dry. They crunched very loudly. About 5 minutes in of following, Kit stopped dead in his tracks and I heard him mutter, "Oh crap." I walked up to him, and just behind some rocks was the man crouched down looking at us. I didn't have time to react, as the man stood up and sprinted towards us shouting like a madman. Kit and I turned and began screaming. I could just sense the man's presence closing in on me, and I was fearing that at any second he would grab me, and that would be the end of me. Luckily for me, the man tripped and fell. I remember just feeling the air move under the man's body inches behind me. I was easily within an arm's reach. Hearing the man fall, I slowed down, looked back, and saw him lying flat on his stomach, and he let out an angry growl. I turned and continued running. I couldn't see Kit at this point, but I could hear the crunching of leaves and branches, and I knew he was close. Eventually I got out of the bush and started running on the road back to the house. When I got there, Kit was already there, out of breath and sweating. I started crying due to the fear that something terrible may have happened, and I never spoke of this story to anyone. Apparently neither did Kit. I didn't go to his house after that, and my deepest apologies to the man who my friend and I mistreated. My name is Courtney, and in 2006 my boyfriend Tommy went to jail, and I was left alone in one of the lowest times of my life. I say that because at the time we were both addicted to drugs. I'm almost 2 years clean today, but at the time we were pretty deep in our addiction, and luckily before Tommy got arrested we were renting a room in our friend Christina's grandmother's house. They lived in a town called Tierra Santa, which is a suburban small town in San Diego, California, where Tommy and Christina both grew up. It wasn't just Christina and her grandmother living there though. It was also Christina's brother Michael, her cousin Nicole, and her brother's friend Samuel. It was a very big house. It had 4 bedrooms and a garage that was converted into 2 more bedrooms. We were staying in one of the garage rooms, or I guess at this point, only I was staying there. At the time, me, Christina, and Nicole were all using drugs, and with that lifestyle, usually you have a lot of traffic. Plus, there were 3 other people living there, and everyone besides her grandmother smoked pot. So there were always people coming in and out of the house at any given time, day or night. So I was very used to hearing doors open and close all night without even giving it a second thought. Ever since my boyfriend had been incarcerated, we mostly communicated through letters, but we also spoke over the phone. We didn't get long, mostly just relay important things and tell each other how much we missed one another really quickly. Phone calls in jails are pretty expensive, and we had no real income at the time besides hustling just enough drugs to support our habits, which I came to find was a lot harder to do alone. Anyway, I remember one phone call he had briefly, mentioning that he knew a guy from Tierra Santa named Brett who was in jail with him. It wasn't anything significant. We weren't friends with the guy. In fact, we had an altercation with him the only time I'd actually met him, so I really wasn't fond of him. But it was a pretty big coincidence that he had ended up in the same unit as Tommy. Tommy said Brett apologized to him about the incident we had, and they were sort of getting along now. I didn't blame him because Tommy didn't know too many other people in jail, and I'm sure it was nice to have someone he was familiar with there, even if the guy was a complete piece of... Anyway, about a month after that one afternoon, Christina's sister Nicole came home with a guy who I didn't recognize. At the time, she honestly did this a lot, so I wasn't really surprised, but then I noticed that the guy looked familiar. It was Brett. Brett was always in and out of jail. He would serve a month at a time for small paraphernalia charges or whatever, then he'd be out again into his next jail visit. We didn't say much to each other, basically just hi and bye. Then he went upstairs with Nicole and I went back up to my room, and that was that. Now I don't know if I had mentioned seeing Brett to Tommy or not, because honestly it was hard for Tommy to hear about guys coming over to the house. He wasn't necessarily jealous, but it's hard not to be a little when you're in that position. We have had arguments about it before, and I didn't like to make him stress out more than he already was, or ruin the little time that we had to talk, so I tried to avoid bringing that stuff back up. But looking back on it now, I wish I had said something to him, because he may have prepared me for what was coming. It was about a week later, early morning, and I could hear Nicole, Christina, and their grandmother getting in the car and driving off, as well as our other roommate Samuel. So basically I was alone in the house, which was rare, so I figured I would take advantage of the house being empty to get up and do some much needed cleaning and cook some breakfast. So I was in the middle of doing the dishes when I heard it, a voice coming from behind me. "Hey Courtney." Scared and confused, I turned around to see Brett. "I stole some steaks. Do you want to eat?" he asked. I looked confused. "What are you doing here?" "Tom showed me your pictures in jail. You look really good," he said with a creepy smile on his face. At this point I could smell the alcohol on him. I noticed that he was holding a backpack. I just said, "Please get out of here. I have things to do. I'm really busy." "Want a drink?" "No, just leave." I could hear it in his voice. He was wasted, probably hadn't slept in days. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the bottle. And the next thing he said was, "You know, I'm loaded. It's in the backpack." That's when I knew this was serious. "Okay, well, it's way too early to drink, and I'm so tired, and Tom wouldn't be okay with you being here." He said, "Tom won't care. Just make me dinner." He was wasted. All I could think about was the firearm and how I was going to get out of this situation. I was looking for anything I could grab, any options. That's when he began walking towards me. So I started walking the opposite way around the kitchen table that was between us, pretending to clean and telling him, "Seriously, you need to go." That's when he grabbed me and held me down on the table, and he slapped me. He said, "What's wrong with you? Not gonna touch you." So at first I thought those were probably his intentions, but now I knew they were. Inside I was freaking out, but was trying to play it cool, because this was serious, and I was truly scared for my life. He let go of me and started talking about making dinner again, and how pretty I was. I don't recall it all because I was just thinking about what I was going to do. Then in the corner of my eye I saw him, with the bottle in his hand, cocking it back as if he were going to hit me with it. That's when I got an idea. I needed to play along with him right now. "Oh my god, I need a cigarette," I said, and sped away from him. "Do you want to come smoke with me? And after that I'll make you your steak?" He liked that idea. So I walked outside and lit a cig. The side yard is small. It's just a walkway with a sidewalk and some bricks in front of some plants. So when I saw he was outside, I quickly turned around and squeezed by him, went into the house and locked the door behind me. He was furious. He was yelling to let him back in and started banging on the door. I immediately ran to the front door and locked it as well, and then called the police. I ran back to the side door and showed him that I was on the phone, and he was banging on the door until we realized what I was doing, and then he ran out the side gate. Okay, so side note. This house has had a lot of police calls because, like I said, there have been a lot of drug addicts coming in and out, and we were always getting complaints from neighbors. So believe it or not, even after calling the cops and telling them the guy attacked me and was outside my house banging on the door, they didn't show up for 6 hours. So at that point, we didn't even answer the door. It doesn't end there. A few weeks later, about 9 p.m. at night, I'm sleeping in my room and get woken up by the sound of the door opening. You guessed it, it was Brett. He had come back. This time, the house was not empty, so I just screamed, "Get the hell out my house," and he instantly ran out my room and out the front door. I called the police again, and this time they showed up after only a few hours. When I gave the statement, one of the cops knew Brett very well and told me that on the same day I originally called, they got another call from a few houses down and found Brett passed out from alcohol poisoning on their front lawn. They didn't have a reason to why they didn't show up that day, but they basically made me feel like it was all my fault for not locking the front door, that I didn't know was unlocked. Bottom line is they really don't care, I'm sure, because they knew there was drug activity in the house and they were very judgmental. So we got no justice from the police. Next month though, I made sure the doors were locked every night and still didn't sleep well. It was about 3 months after the original incident that I get a call from Tommy with some interesting news. Guess who he ran into in jail? Now, I don't want to give too many details about what happened, but basically after the incident at the house, Tommy told everyone in his pod about it, so they all knew what Brett had done and were waiting for him. So as soon as he landed in the same unit again, everyone got Tommy and basically handed him to Brett on a silver platter. I can't go into too much detail, but I can say that from that night on, Brett spent the rest of his time in jail in the medical unit, and unlike the police in the street, the deputies in jail understood the situation and basically gave Tommy a slap on the wrist. The deputies even said that they would have done the same thing in his shoes. They even helped convince Brett not to press charges on Tommy by saying he could get in more trouble for what he did to me, if only he knew how little the actual police cared. Since that day, Brett has never tried to contact me or Tommy again. It's been about 3.5 years since this happened, and apparently Brett doesn't even use social media anymore or talk or show his face to anyone in Tierra Santa anymore. And thank God for that. Let's never meet again. I am a 20-year-old male and was born and raised in central London. I am very familiar with the potential dangers in central London, and I'm usually a very cautious person and tend not to find myself in sketchy situations. On this day, however, I knew I had no one to blame but myself for having allowed myself and the love of my life to be in a scenario of potential danger. Having grown up in Central, you quickly learn which areas to avoid, as you do in a very big city. And being as cautious as I usually am, I knew better than to have been where I was at that time of day. Me and my current girlfriend Mia had been hanging out early on in our relationship, and one thing we loved to do was meet up after work, and seeing as it was summer and the sun was still out until quite late in the evening, we would hang out in one of London's biggest parks, Hyde Park. We would usually stay in the more populated areas of the park, and would sometimes have a drink while we enjoyed the sunset together, sitting on the grass or by the lake. On this evening we were doing exactly that, just sitting on the grass, and we had a small bottle of vodka that we were sharing between us. We felt like having a drink, seeing as we had had a stressful week at work and were just chilling. For some reason though, this evening had a strange vibe to it. I remember me and my girlfriend talking about her grandmother, who she told me believed in tarot card readings and had done a reading for her before she left her country to move to London. And during the reading, her grandmother had told her something along the lines of, "In London you will find happiness and it's somewhere you need to be." But that also something really bad was to happen to her while she was here. And for some reason this put me on edge, seeing as we were still in the early stages of our relationship. And not to say I generally believe in any of those things, but I'm not necessarily a non-believer either. The sun was starting to go down, and it got to a point where we were both sort of buzzed from the vodka, and at this point I guess we were both feeling some tension, and both of us had the same look in our eyes, as if to say, let's find somewhere quiet to be alone. And this was when in retrospect the cautious side of me should have been the dominant force and told me to quit it. Wrong time and place. But no. Instead, both of us were thinking differently. Now I know parks at night in London are known to be the safest places, with the odd crackheads here and there, and usually the sketchy stuff goes down in the middle of the night. So I never really hung out in parks until late. As we both decided to look for somewhere quiet to chill in private, we walked deeper into Hyde Park towards a more sort of forested area, with a huge mansion-style building and a dimly lit path for cyclists and pedestrians. There were a bunch of trees over to the side in pitch darkness, where we thought, okay, this looks fine. And there's a big building 100 meters that's fairly lit, albeit no one to be seen, so it seems secluded enough for possibly to hang out in peace, but not so secluded that anything sketchy will go down. As we stepped off the path into the trees, we walked deeper into the trees, and Mia pulled on my arm. "Babe, I saw something move over there." And she pointed to some trees and bushes about 20 meters away. "I think I saw someone walking." This is when I was being as cautious as I usually am, and I should have said nope and made a U-turn and left, but no, I told her to wait, got the flashlight from my phone out, and walked over to where she said she'd seen someone. I walked around and didn't see anyone or anything, so I walked back over to her and we agreed it was probably shadows from the trees playing tricks on her imagination. After checking a couple of trees with low-hanging branches, we found one we thought we could sit under, and the branches were hanging really low, right down to the ground, and it created a sort of perimeter around us, where anyone walking down the lit path would be unable to see us. We could see out of the foliage and branches, and could see lights from the main road faintly on the opposite side of the park, as we were really deep in the less populated side of the park at this point. All in all, once we had arrived, I'm pretty sure she and I were both no longer feeling as romantic as we were before, and we felt quite on edge. was sitting down against a tree trunk, with her on my lap. We were making out, and I felt we were really relaxed at this point, and the shadows that we had seen before were slowly slipping back into the recesses of our minds. We were sharing a kiss when a strange feeling compelled me to open my eyes, and as I did, I noticed the silhouette of what in that split second my brain associated to be two thick branches from the lower hanging branches, but they caught my attention as my brain began to process that they were not what I thought they were. They were in fact a pair of legs. As I followed those pair of legs, I saw the silhouette of a hooded man standing there, not moving a muscle. And even though it was pitch black, I was sure I could feel this man's gaze. He was staring directly at us. My heart skipped a beat. Somehow I managed to just keep calm enough to whisper in her ear, "Babe, there's someone watching us. Get up." I don't think she really understood me, but understood enough to turn around to see what I was talking about. And at that point she screams, but the man doesn't move and doesn't flinch. He doesn't react, and it's probably the most frightening part of this encounter. Normally when someone's up to no good, upon being caught they would react in some way, whether in panic or run. But instead, nothing. He stood there staring at us without a word. Just as she screamed, I told her to get up, and so did I. And I moved in front of her, almost waiting for some sort of reaction from the man, or expecting someone else to jump out from somewhere. I'm waiting to see what his move is so that I can react. I was split between confronting him, making a run for it, or waiting for him to make his move. In those 10 seconds of indecision, he slowly turns to his left and begins walking away, seemingly unbothered, and this was the moment I saw fit to get Mia and myself from out under the tree onto the lit path, while doing so not taking my eyes off what I could still see of the man through the trees. I could see his legs walking until he seemingly just vanished. Once we reached the path, my first thought was to grab the bottle of vodka we had from earlier, knowing we had to follow the path towards the exit from the park, or at least to a more populated section of it. The direction of the path also being the direction the creepy man had seemed to walk in. Hence, me holding onto the glass bottle of vodka, thinking that if things go from bad to worse, at least I can attempt to use it as some sort of protection. We follow the path, Mia holding me tightly. My awareness levels have now shot through the moon, head on a swivel. Having followed the path for what felt like an eternity, we finally reached civilization and left the park. Every now and then I still get flashbacks of the image of the silhouette of the man just standing there staring. I've thought about what his intentions could have been, and many things come to mind. But one thing that I am certain of are that his intentions were far from good. Since then, neither of us have returned to any park at night, nor have we gone to secluded areas of any park for any reason. A lesson learned. That could have been easily avoided. Seeing as I wasn't oblivious to potential threats and dangers in parks at night. I've always known better, and I deeply regret having allowed myself to be put in a position, along with someone I deeply care about, where she or I could have been harmed. I appreciate this story may be a little anticlimactic, and isn't as scary to many of you listeners as it was for us, but it certainly scared the hell out of us, and to this day the image of the motionless silhouette standing there staring at us in the dark has not left my mind. First, I have to tell you that I've never been in trouble with the law, and I've never stolen anything in my life. This is relevant to the story. This all occurred in the summer of 2014 when I was 16. I live in the second largest town in Washington state, but still a relatively small town by most of America's standards. Our first Walmart supercenter was still relatively new in 2004, and was only 10 to 15 minutes away from my house. So my family and I went there quite a bit for most of our needs. We got to know most of the employees, and we had never had a problem with any of them until one day I noticed someone following me. Okay, I thought that's odd, but didn't think too much of it and continued shopping with my family. But whenever I got that feeling, this one guy would always be around. I told my family what was going on, so we would all keep an eye out for this weird guy. He didn't look weird or out of the ordinary. He was probably in his mid to late 20s, about 5'6", average build, red hair, goatee, and he usually wore a baseball hat. We figured out that he was one of those security secret shopper people that a lot of retail stores hire. Well, this continued for about a month or longer, but as time went on, the creepy guy got more confident. Not only was he following me, but he was peeking through racks of clothes, between shelves at the end of aisles, and darting in and out of aisles between me. It didn't even matter to him that my family was always with me. My mum wouldn't let me go anywhere in the store alone. Not that I wanted to. I was a scared little 16-year-old girl, and I wasn't about to go anywhere without someone with me. It got to the point where we were afraid he would wait until I left the store to follow me to our car and perhaps follow us home. Thank goodness that never happened, but who knew what the guy was capable of? My mum and I decided to confide in one of the cashiers that we'd gotten to know really well. She walked around with me and the guy was nowhere to be found. Needless to say, she didn't believe me and thought I was insane. The day finally came when everything blew up, figuratively speaking. My mum, both my older sisters, my very little niece who was only a few months older than I, had to go to Walmart. The trip to the store started out okay with no sign of the creepy dude anywhere. So I was having a pretty good time when the feeling of being watched came and my head began spinning. I thought, oh no, not him again. There he was peeking at me, darting through the aisles, you know, the usual. We hurried and got our things and went to checkout. Mr. Guy had never followed me to the cash register before, but he did that day. I was standing there waiting for the cashier to finish ringing up our things when my mum noticed him in the women's clothing aisle near to where we were checking out. My mum had enough. She walked a little closer to him and asked him angrily, "What the hell do you think you're doing following my daughter around? If you don't leave her alone, I'll call the cops." He then replied, "I can follow and watch whoever I want." So my mum stomped over to the register fuming, paid for our things and loudly said, "That's it, we're getting a manager." So my family and I went to customer service, and while my mum was demanding a manager, the cashier was snooty and acted like I was in the wrong, go figure. I kept scanning my surroundings to find him. It was 10 minutes before the manager showed up, and when we finally did, my mum and I explained what had been going on and offered for him to look through our pockets, purses and things. He refused and said he believed us. He got the assistant manager and asked me to walk around the store where they'd followed the way behind to watch what happened. Sure enough, the creepy guy starts following me and they catch him red-handed. They took him to the back room and that was the last I saw of him. It took me a long time to go anywhere alone again after that. I thank God I have such a supportive mum and family, otherwise it probably could have ended much differently, because I wouldn't have had the support and protection I did. Please be aware of your surroundings, even in places you think should be safe. And to the creepy guy, let's not meet. I went to go play Smash Bros. Ultimate a while back, when they were doing the Nintendo holiday in America. Since I live in New York, I had to go to Queens Mall to play the game. It was Black Friday, and I saw the perfect opportunity to play the game as long as I wanted. My theory was right. So I decided to spend time walking around the mall since I didn't have to rush. Anyone who lives in New York can tell you about the people on the subway and buses who sell candy to fund whatever it is. Well, there was someone like that in the mall who tried to sell me Airheads. I immediately said no. I had no singles and I don't buy from these people anyway, but he persisted. I noticed there was a dribble of spit on his lip. It was pus-colored, so I made the assumption he was probably a user. He tried to change things by asking me if I had singles. I made sure a mall cop was in sight when I said no, and then he tried to tell me he could trade his singles for my bills. I would then make things easier for him by doing so, but I said no again and decided to walk in a circle around the same place. But he paid no mind. He tried to guilt trip me because we were both black, but I don't have empathy or sympathy, so that wouldn't work. I finally decided to entertain him and trade my 10 for 10 singles. He took out his singles and counted them, and I watched him count to 13 and trade me the singles. I did the classic "I don't let go until you let go" tactic, and he stopped. He told me he was about to hand me 13 and that I was trying to scam him. I told him he was the one who counted, and he redid it. I watched him count 10 singles and he stopped and said I was trying to scam him without me even touching them. He counted again, and I did it loud as well. This was when we were both getting annoyed. I yelled at him that he had 10 in his hand, and that was what he was about to give me. But he asked me how because he had 13 singles, and I told him that 10 were in his right hand and 3 were in his left. That had made up the 13, and all he had to do was give me the money in his right hand, but he wasn't having any of it. He got pissed off and walked quietly away, and he followed me onto an escalator and tried to tell me really quietly, "Listen, I'm not afraid to mess you up here, got it?" I just replied, "Sure." I finally got him to leave by saying, "Alright dude, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I've got no interest in this anymore, leave me alone." He left without a word, and I considered telling mall security, but I decided it wasn't worth it. If he came to me again, I'd make sure everyone knew, though I was cautious to make sure he wasn't following me around the store for the rest of the day. Creep. I was about 6 to 7 years old. I didn't have any friends when I was that age because of how messed up my family was, and having ADHD and really messed up teeth. They're fine now after braces and a palate extender, but there was this older girl named Angela next door. She was about 14, and I didn't know any better, and when she asked to hang out all the time, I did. One day she invited me to play or something or whatever, and she brought me into her parents' room. Her dad was an army ranger, but there was a disgusting amount of weapons in that room. She picked up a shotgun and joked about ending me and other people. Me, being 6 or 7, just laughed it off, thinking it was cool. She then loaded the gun in front of me and showed me how it worked, pointed at my face and told me to crawl around the house for hours. I crawled around and cried, and she would put the thing in my mouth and my face and would spook me with many other weapons and dry fire them at me. She then told me at one point to get undressed, and I told her I would do it in the bathroom because I was uncomfortable doing it in front of others. So I crawled into the bathroom, slammed the door and locked it, jumped out the window, and was about a story and a half up. I landed on my face and chipped my tooth. I got away and kept this secret for about 2 weeks from my mum. I didn't know any better. When I finally told her she lost it, she called the cops and they went over to her parents and questioned her and her parents. Her reasoning is that I shot her with a Nerf gun one time, so it was payback. I didn't see her for years later until I found out she was admitted to a mental hospital by her parents. I don't know how that day could have gone, but I'm glad I'm still around. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you have enjoyed tonight's video. If you don't already follow me on Twitter, please do so. I'm really trying to grow my following on there because I haven't even got 4,000 followers on there. And there's 250,000 of you. It's quite a big discrepancy. It's not something I push very often or have done in the past, but there is a reason I'm trying to insist you guys to go and follow me over there. I've been working on something which I've teased for a while now, for a very long time, and it's finally getting to the end, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm hoping that when it releases you guys really like it, and it would obviously help create buzz a lot if you followed me on there and could help retweet and stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's the reason. It is a pretty cool thing. I'm hoping most of you will like it. But it's been a lot of work. So much work. Still, I don't want to spoil anything prematurely. So, thanks guys. The link is in the description, by the way. If anything spooky or scary has ever happened to you, you can send me your experience via email or Twitter. No, email or Reddit. Don't send me things on Twitter, not stories. What else? Oh yes, that's right. A huge thank you to all my lovely patrons and members whose names can be seen on screen. If you want to sign up to either, you get some fancy perks for doing so. Links in the description also. Everything's in the description. But for now, I'm going to sign off. So stay safe and awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.